Tensions between the United States and Venezuela haven't been this high for many years. US warships and a nuclear submarine are just 200 kilometers off Venezuela's coast, and they're carrying over 2,000 US Marines. Venezuela has responded by deploying its own navy and claims to have mobilized a vast militia of 4 million people.
Hello and welcome to the Nexus. This week we're looking at what's going on with the United States and Venezuela. President Trump insists he's just trying to stop the drug traffickers, but President Maduro says it looks more like an invasion. We'll be debating that with our guests in just a moment.
It doesn't make any sense in terms of fighting drugs.
That has one goal: to overthrow the Maduro government.
The United States has every right to stop, all the crimes that are being committed in Venezuela.
We absolutely do not have the resources to invade Venezuela.
But first, here are the main developments of this intriguing story.
The tension between the two presidents goes back years. Trump accuses Maduro of being the head of a drug cartel and an illegitimate president. Maduro denies these allegations and says the empire, presumably referring to America, has gone mad.
El imperio se volvió loco.
In his first term, Trump's Justice Department charged Maduro with narco-terrorism and offered a $15 million reward for information leading to his arrest.
Maduro and his other defendants have betrayed the Venezuelan people.
The Biden administration increased the reward to $25 million. Then last month, Trump doubled it to $50 million.
Maduro uses foreign terrorist organizations like TDA, Sinaloa, and Cartel of the Suns to bring deadly drugs and violence into our country. He is one of the largest narco traffickers in the world and a threat to our national security.
The Trump administration has designated the Cartel of the Suns, or Cartel de los Soles, as a global terrorist organization, and it claims Maduro's government uses state resources, including the military, to assist the cartel's drug trafficking into the United States.
We have Venezuela acting up. They continue to send drugs into our country. They've been very nasty.
Maduro denies the cartel even exists and says Washington's assessment is based on flawed evidence which is being used to discredit his government. But now the war of words has been overtaken by the mobilization of serious military hardware. The US has sent 7 warships, a nuclear-powered fast attack submarine, and more than 4,500 military personnel, including 2,200 Marines, to waters off South America, all ostensibly deployed to disrupt drug cartel activities. But Venezuela says they're actually part of a planned invasion aimed at regime change, and so it's responded by deploying its own warships and drones to patrol the coast. 15,000 troops to its border with Colombia, and recruited thousands of new members to its Bolivarian national militia, which it's claimed already has up to 5 million members. Whether or not this is the beginning of an invasion remains to be seen. Most experts think not. But what is clear is that the US government wants Maduro gone, and it's not just because of the drug allegations. Recent Republican and Democrat presidents accuse him of rigging the last 2 elections. In 2019, the Trump administration recognized Venezuela's opposition leader, Juan Guaido, as the country's true president.
Joining us in the gallery is the true and legitimate president of Venezuela, Juan Guaido.
5 years later, the Biden administration also declared the opposition leader, this time Edmundo Gonzalez, the winner.
Exiled Venezuelan opposition leader Edmundo Gonzalez claims allies of President Maduro forced him to sign a letter accepting Maduro's victory earlier this month before he could flee the country.
Maduro maintains he won re-election fair and square, and that's why the National Electoral Council, Venezuela's sole electoral authority, officially declared him the winner. While a group of UN experts claim the management by Venezuela's Electoral Council fell short of the basic transparency and integrity essential for credible elections. Sure, Washington wants Maduro gone, but will it resort to regime change to achieve it?
Well, let's bring in our panel now, and today I'm joined by Jorge Galicia, a Venezuelan exile living in the United States, Latin America expert Arnold August, and Javier Farje, a journalist and international affairs analyst living in London. I'd like to start with the Venezuelan on the panel, if I may. Jorge, why did you leave Venezuela in the first place?
Well, Matthew, first of all, thank you for having me. I when I was living in Venezuela, I was part of the political opposition. In the year 2017, I got involved so much in the massive demonstrations that were taking place in Venezuela that year. And because of my involvement, well, I suffered heavy political persecution. I needed to go into hiding for about 3 months. I went into total isolation, life-changing experience. But to make a long story short, a year after that, I was forced to basically escape, and I came here to the United States, where I claim political asylum. And well, I'm still waiting for my case to be reviewed. But
Right.
yeah, that's why I left.
What do you make of Nicolas Maduro's claims that this naval deployment is really a pretext for an invasion, for regime change?
Well, I think what Nicolas Maduro is doing is not only hurting Venezuelan people like me and my family, it's also hurting the entire region. It's hurting Colombia, it's hurting Brazil, but it's also hurting the United States. And I think the United States has every right to pursue, to stop, all the crimes that are being committed in Venezuela, to pursue the stop of these crimes, because drugs are being produced and exported from Venezuela. Terrorists are being given Venezuelan passports to enter the United States and Europe. Venezuela is being used as a territorial platform for countries like Iran, like China, like Russia, for these countries to have a presence there and harm American interests. So I am convinced that, well, by Trump deploying these forces in the Caribbean Sea, he is not only helping Venezuelans by adding pressure against the Maduro regime, but he's also helping the American people. So
okay,
I think
thank you for that,
Maduro
Arnold.
is right to be afraid.
Arnold, you don't buy a word of that, do you?
No, I would ask our friend what is his view on American sanctions against Venezuela? What is his view about American intervention in Venezuela? Because as far as I saw in his comments, there's no consideration at all regarding these very offensive measures taken by the American government. You know, as you mentioned in the introduction, it goes back to Biden, but it also goes back to Obama in 2015 when he started the sanction program against Venezuela. So this is an ongoing thing over several administrations and has one goal: to overthrow the Chavez regime before and now the Maduro government. And now later on, I'll explain why I think that is the goal of the United States.
Jorge, quick rebuttal, then we'll go to Javier.
Sure. Well, the first thing I would say is that the Obama administration only put individual sanctions against individual personnel that were part of the regime. He never did like a general sanction against the Venezuelan economy. That never came until, I believe, 2017. And the first major problems that we saw with the Venezuelan economies, all the shortage, all the big lines just to buy a piece of bread, it started to appear at least in the year 2014. So I would never blame sanctions for all the economic collapse that we're seeing in Venezuela. That came actually way before. I blame socialism. I blame the Maduro regime and his evil political decisions. And I believe sanctions are a good tool to add pressure against the regime, because all the money that was flowing into the Maduro regime was being used to finance military repression against people like me, against my family.
Javier, in a way, we're getting a history lesson about who started it. But what we're really interested to know right now is, what is that naval deployment doing there? What is the real intention?
It doesn't make any sense in terms of fighting drugs. Why? And I'm going to introduce some facts here. This is an attempt to intimidate Maduro, obviously, because Trump has already said that he wants to get rid of him. According to the World Drug Report of the United Nations, only 10% of the drug traffic from Latin America to the United States goes via the Caribbean Sea. Most of it, 90%, goes via the Pacific Ocean from ports in Colombia, Ecuador, Peru, and Mexico. So it doesn't make any sense in terms of fighting drugs. Second, he blames the Tren de Aragua, this big network of this big criminal enterprise, which is a multinational enterprise, for being taking drugs. Drugs are a small part of the activities of this multinational crime gang. They do mainly extortion, assassinations, cybercrime, human traffic, etc., etc. They don't do drugs. Drugs is a very small part of the activity. So it doesn't make any sense why he went to the Caribbean instead of going to the Pacific, which is the route that most of the drug uses to go to the United States. It doesn't make any sense. Now, they said that it was full of drugs, but we haven't been given any evidence of why he actually did that.
Arnold, just to develop that point, you're even more skeptical in a way. You don't believe that the cartel of the Suns even exists.
That's right. It's not only me, but all the United Nations drug organizations have indicated clearly in 2025 and over the past 25 years in the annual reports that the problem of drugs in Venezuela does not exist. And just this morning, regarding this latest attack on the boat in the Caribbean, it was explained visually and otherwise by the Ministry of Communications of Venezuela, Freddy Nunez, that it seems to be that it was an AI-induced film that Trump taunted as being a big victory against these killing these 11 people. And I think we have to get to the heart of the matter, and that is, why does the U.S. government want to overthrow Maduro? In my view, in addition to oil, we know that is important, but I think there are also important points. Maduro is known, as before Chavez, as being very outspoken in support of Palestine against Israel and the United States, very outspoken in support of Russia against Ukraine and NATO.
If
very
I may,
outspoken in support. Just a second. Very outspoken in support of Iran's right to respond to the U.S. aggression on its soil. The United States doesn't like that. If you don't believe me, you could ask the official leader of the opposition, Mario Machado. This is what she says. She said, this is not a regime change issue. We have to deal with Maduro because of his ties to Iran, to Russia, etc. That is really the heart of the problem.
Let Jorge come in for a moment, please. Okay, Jorge, come in.
Yeah, you claim that the Cartel of the Sons, of the Soles, however you want to call it, doesn't exist. But did you know that the nephews of Maduro's wife were arrested and then later convicted because they were trying to use diplomatic passports to enter into the United States with luggage full of drugs that they were trying to smuggle into the United States to then sell and profit from it. Listen, this is a regime that collapsed one of the most productive enterprises in the world, which was PDVSA, or National Oil Company. And then after that, they needed to rely on drug production and export to keep money coming into their coffins. So there is plenty of evidence out there that this regime, that Maduro, is selling drugs all over the world to make some profit. So
I just want to say
that,
look,
that this is not a narco state and the Cartel of the Suns doesn't exist.
Look,
it's quite frankly ridiculous. You should read more about my country, honestly.
Look, clearly you're not going to agree on whether or not the cartel actually exists. Javier, I want to ask you about what's going on inside Venezuela. Maduro has said he's mobilized millions of people in this militia in order to defend themselves against a possible US invasion. Others would point to the fact that since Maduro took power in 2013, 7.9 million people have left, around 1 in 5 people. And therefore, they say, how on earth can a leader like that muster such a big militia?
Well, because what happened was in Venezuela was that Hugo Chavez made the army part of his political project. So the army became very politicized in Venezuela, for starters. And the army people, have contact with other people in the country, and they have attracted them. Now, what's happened here is this, that the more they threat Venezuela, the more people will say, look, we are going to be with the government and not with the United States. Not only that, the opposition is quite divided in terms of whether they accept an invasion of the Americans or not. Enrique Capriles, a former candidate and one of the most important figures of the opposition, has said that invading Venezuela is not the solution, that it will be a very bad news for Venezuela, and where all the people in the opposition believe that this invasion should happen. So these militias are young people who've been taken from the poor neighborhoods of Venezuela to integrate them and to defend what they call the integrity of the country. And the more Trump threatens Venezuela, the more he threatens to invade, to implement regime change, the more he's going to say, look, this is not me who is in danger, this is the country which is in danger. You do not want to be invaded by the Americans. We don't want to have the Americans here, and therefore we have to defend it. So, and that's happened in Cuba before, it's happened in other parts of the world, where the more you get threats from the government of the United States, the more people get together. And the opposition at the moment is not exactly unified in terms of what they actually want to happen. They want Maduro out, obviously, no question about that. But they are not. But some of them are not really sure that an invasion and a regime change by force by the United States will be the solution for Venezuela.
Javier, Farje, Arnold, August, and Jorge Galicia, thank you all very much. Really appreciate that. Well, Venezuela is a relatively small country, less than 1/10 of America's population, but it has the world's biggest proven oil reserves, and so it has some very big friends too, Russia and China.
Venezuela's close ties to Russia and China represent another significant point of contention with the US, extending far beyond the diplomatic recognition and global support both nations offer Maduro's government. In May of this year, Venezuela and Russia signed a 10-year strategic partnership covering energy, defense and technology. Venezuela's military relies heavily on Russian arms, and the country also hosts a large Kalashnikov factory producing rifles and ammunition. China, meanwhile, is actually Venezuela's largest supplier of military equipment and provides crucial investment to keep the country's economy afloat. Beijing has extended billions of dollars in loans over recent decades. In exchange, Venezuela grants both Beijing and Moscow access to its vast oil reserves, while serving as a strategic anti-US ally in Latin America, and of course, a useful partner for intelligence gathering.
Well, for more on those ties and the military maneuvers around Venezuela, I'm joined by the former US Naval Intelligence Officer, Malcolm Nance, and a former Pentagon official, David Roches. Malcolm, may I start with you? Everyone wants to know, why has the Trump administration deployed that naval presence to near the coast of Venezuela? Looking at the amount of hardware that's been sent down, what do you deduce is the actual motive?
Very early on in the Trump administration, actually within the first 2 days, Donald Trump signed a presidential finding that they were going to be taking action against Venezuela. He has had problems with the Maduro regime since he came in the first administration. And apparently, in late July, there was a secret finding that the President of the United States had already legally designated the Maduro regime and the narco gang Tren de Aragua as a international transnational terrorist and narco-terrorist group. That's when we started seeing activities occur. The U.S. Marine Corps was ordered to put together an amphibious task force comprised of a small aircraft carrier, the USS Iwo Jima, 2 other amphibious landing ships, which would give the United States a capability of 4,500 Marines and sailors, and then as many as 5 more warships for a surface action group and a air defense and anti-land capability, and a Los Angeles class atomic submarine, the USS Newport News. They started transiting down to Venezuela in mid-August, and it only got on the radar of the news media about 10 days ago when the deployment of these vessels occurred, and another squadron of surveillance aircraft were sent to Puerto Rico. It appears that the Trump administration strategy is to start a de facto blockade of Venezuela, and that they have a secret finding that there is going to be a counter drug or counter narco terrorist war with the Maduro regime, who they believe is backing the Sinaloa cartel, the Tren de Aragua, and the MS-13 gangs of El Salvador. And their people in the United States. It's very convoluted, but apparently
it's fine.
Trump administration is taking.
The thing is, Malcolm, we have these 2 explanations, and you very evenly handedly spread it out for us. the thing is, it's either to interdict the drug cartels or, as the Venezuelans are saying, it is actually a pretext for an invasion and regime change. Looking at the hardware down there in the South Caribbean, what do you think it is?
We absolutely do not have the resources to invade Venezuela. What I think they're doing is putting in the building blocks to do a blockade of Venezuela and to use the pretext of small craft bringing out drugs to say that they're actually going to take harsher measures against them. We have been interdicting small craft, mini submarines filled with drugs for decades, but usually the U.S. Coast Guard and maritime interdiction narcotics maritime interdiction teams have gone down. They seize these vessels, document the drugs so that they know that they actually have drugs, and arrest the individuals and turn them over to the host country or to U.S. jurisdiction. What happened yesterday or the day before is we have decided to unilaterally execute the people that are doing these by using military level weapons against people we suspect are drug dealers.
Understood. Let me ask that same question to David Roche. What's the real purpose of the naval deployment?
I agree with Malcolm. The only embarked troops is the 22nd Marine Expeditionary Unit, which is only about 2,200 Marines and sailors. That's not enough to invade Venezuela, and I don't think that's in the cards. I think that in addition to the stated purpose, which I believe is what is the primary motivation, I think the secondary motivation is Venezuela's dictatorship is under severe financial stress. We know that in 2020, the leadership of Venezuela was considered by the U.S. as being its own cartel, called the Cartel de Soles, or the Cartel of the Suns, referring to the insignia that the military leaders in the Venezuelan armed forces wore. But in the past, Venezuela's financial backers have been Iran and Russia. And both of those countries are extremely stressed right now because of their ongoing wars, neither which has gone well. I think that the logical place for Venezuela to find money, even though they have the world's largest oil reserves, larger than Saudi Arabia, they're unable to produce their own oil. I think that the logical thing they would do is move to narcotics. And I think that by stepping up the campaign against narcotic smuggling out of Venezuela, which is to some degree intertwined, perhaps not directed by the Venezuelan government, but does provide resources for some regime loyalists at least. This enhances the financial stress on Maduro and conceivably could contribute to his eventual overthrow by the Venezuelans.
A number of analysts we've spoken to, and in fact the United Nations themselves, are very skeptical that that cartel even exists. And they suggest that perhaps the reason for the naval deployment is to scare Venezuela from associating too closely with Russia and China. David, you first, and then Malcolm.
Well, so far, the assets we've seen here have been directed at outgoing ships, not incoming stuff, and small boats. But in the past, there have been issues with Iranian transfers of oil, which of course are sanctioned, and so the United States would have the ability to interdict Iranian vessels under U.S. sanctions. But that is controversial, and obviously countries in like Russia don't like that, and even our European partners are somewhat hesitant about it. So it remains to be seen what the schedule is. So far as this is directed against what appears to be an obvious small boat trafficking something, we don't know what. I don't think there'll be much protests against it, even though it's being done on the high seas. Narcotics is an issue for every country, to include Russia, to include Iran. And I don't think there'll be too many protests internationally. There are more domestic protests because, as Malcolm noted, this is basically an extrajudicial execution. But it is, and I think the Trump administration is on firm ground saying they're just extending, by designating them as narco-terrorists, they're extending the same pattern that really was solidified under the Obama administration of executing people, to include American citizens.
Just a very quick last question for you, Malcolm. Similar question, really. How much of this naval exercise is designed to disrupt the relationship between Venezuela and Russia and Venezuela and China?
Yeah, the naval deployment will have no impact on the relations between Venezuela and the other two countries, between Russia, China, even Iran, who has deployed ships out to Venezuela. This is an exercise of force the Trump administration is doing for its base, because in terms of naval power, in terms of interdiction, this is virtually no different than it was for decades. It's just a little more air power. There's drone power, as we saw, that carried out that attack. But Venezuela is a force to itself. Until you can get a ground, ashore and try to effect a regime change, they have 320,000 troops. This will only make Maduro more popular. Russia is a bugaboo here. They've been giving them weapon systems. Iran itself may even try to assist, but I don't think that this will have any effect.
Malcolm Nance and David Roches, thank you both very much for your analysis today. Really appreciate it. And thank you at home and on your phones for watching. Until next week then, goodbye.